Welcome everyone back to weekly weather updates, and in today's video we can do our 5th 2023-2024 winter look ahead. Now in the past 4 updates we have had a look at various different climate drivers and models for the winter season, and we did our first update with using August data. But now we're going to have a look at the latest October data. So we haven't had a look at some of these seasonal charts in a good number of weeks because they do update once a month. We've had a look at August data, we've had a look at September's data, and today we'll be having a look at the various models for October, which has only just come out in the last 24 hours or so. Now, if you haven't seen this sort of video before, haven't seen these charts before, essentially, in all these models, we'll be having a look at the mean sea level pressure for each month for coming from the base time of October. So the models run in October. We have to see the mean sea level pressure predicted by the runs or modelled by the runs for November, December, January, February, March. Pretty much covering the whole of the winter now. And with the mean sea level pressure, we'll be able to see where we're going to see potentially pockets of high pressure, low pressure develop through that month, which can allow us to infer the rough wind direction. And of course, that wind direction can allow us to see what sort of air masses we'll be seeing that month or in that sort of period to give us a good look at what the surface weather could be like. So in these charts, we're mainly looking at where blocking patterns can develop, where the oranges and blues are. Oranges to our north would indicate blocking patterns. Orange to our south would indicate more of a westerly flow. Westerly flow, milder weather, colder weather with more of a blocking pattern with easterly and northerly winds. So that's what we're looking at in these models. And of course, it's not only important to have a look at these models just by themselves, we've also got to compare them to what they were showing last month or the month before that. Now, if you have been watching most of these winter look aheads, you'll probably have found that a lot of these runs have shown more of a blocked pattern, especially through the new year into January and February. So not so much through November, December like we were seeing this time last year for last winter, and that did come to fruition. Remember, we had about 2 weeks of very cold weather at the start of December. Again, it wasn't crazy for many areas, but some areas it was really quite a historic first couple of weeks with lots of heavy snowfall. So we did get, the winter look ahead did have a good grasp on last winter. Again, not getting everything right, but definitely the overall pattern of seeing some cold weather in the early winter. And the latest runs over the last couple of months have suggested perhaps some cold weather through the new year into January and February. So in this video, we'll be seeing whether that pattern is holding up. Now, for our first model, we'll start on the ECMWF, one of the most reliable models and one that most regard is one of the best. Its data has actually been out for a little bit longer than most of the other runs, so you may have already seen what this model has hinted at. And it was showing cold weather in both August and in September's runs, but the latest run has backed off from that idea a little bit. Now, if you're a bit disappointed by that, wanting some cold weather as we head into the winter, we are going to be having a look at 4 other big runs, which actually still hint at the idea and still reinforce that idea of some more blocked weather. But interesting seeing some consistency from some runs and the ECMWF chopping and changing a little bit. Very interesting. So if we do start on the latest ECMWF, you can see the base time is October, and the valid time here is for November. So you can see the top right of the chart here, November 2023. So if you do look at the UK, you can see lots of blues to our south. That would be indicative of lower pressure. To our north, a little bit of yellows or oranges here, indicating perhaps some higher pressure. Again, nothing crazy. Again, the percentiles here, you know, if we're seeing darker blues or darker reds, then there's quite a good probability. And again, these are ensembles, so this is not just one run, these are ensembles all put together. So the overall ECMWF ensembles going into this. So this would suggest mainly a westerly flow, but perhaps some transient Scandinavian highs, or some ridging to the north, maybe allowing some cooler northerly or easterly winds for small periods of time, so we wouldn't expect anything too blocked with this sort of pattern. Now into December, we actually see a little bit of yellows across Europe, and blues towards Greenland and northeast Canada out to the Atlantic. Now this would probably actually warrant a west to southwesterly flow. Again, the high pressure signal isn't crazy across Europe, but it wouldn't be indicative of anything particularly cold at all, and this would actually be a pretty mild pattern. But remember, we were really looking at the new year for colder in the last few updates, so if we have a look at January, unfortunately it's not showing anything remotely cold at all. Lots of blues over the top of us, no real signs of any yellows up towards Greenland. If there were some yellows up towards Greenland, we would be looking at perhaps some wavy jet streams, some amplified jet streams, some northerly spells, but with lots of blues to our north, it would be indicative of a pretty strong polar vortex. High pressure to our south up towards Mediterranean, that would indicate quite a strong westerly flow. So nothing particularly cold here in January. February, we're seeing that bit of a wavy jet stream pattern with high pressure towards southern Greenland and Iceland, perhaps some amplification in the jets, maybe some northerly patterns here, but no huge blocking spell, nothing direct to our north or our northeast, so we're not looking at anything northerly or easterly based here. Perhaps colder snaps, but nothing sustained. And then finally into March, very little signal at all, but more blues over the top of us, so indicating perhaps more of a westerly flow. So ECMWF definitely backing off a little bit of the idea of blocked weather. Definitely still showing perhaps some northerly spells. Nothing is not completely wash out westerly flow, but definitely more the westerly regime today, or for the month of October, that is. But as I said, this is one model. This is one computer model, and the others that we'll have a look at today are actually suggesting things staying perhaps a bit more blocked. Now this is the latest JMA. This is coming from the Japanese Met Office, or their version. And you can see for November, pretty similar to the ECMWF. No blocking to our north, or no high pressure to our north, but plenty of low pressure, so pretty mild month. As we get into December though, interestingly, we actually see high pressure starting to develop to our north. Still lots of blues for our longitude here, so that would indicate a jet stream moving in off the west, but perhaps southerly tracked was the high pressure to our north. So it probably wouldn't indicate anything crazy in terms of cold weather, but could indicate colder snaps, perhaps northerly incursions, perhaps some marginal snow events, things like that, especially for the north. We saw some patterns like this in December 2017 develop a massive snow event in some areas. It wasn't that cold of a month overall, but we did see some big snow events, especially around, I think it was like the 11th or 12th December. I've done a video on it before where we saw massive snowfall for a very transient event. And it's this sort of pattern that would create that. Into January, we see high pressure over the top of us and up towards Scandinavia. This would be a bit of a battleground situation. We'd probably have cool easterly winds coming up against a strong jet stream off the west. So even though it's not as blocked and as probably bang on cold as last month's update, it still is showing the blocking pattern, just in a slight different orientation. As we head into February, this is pretty cold indeed. Low pressure to our south, again, would indicate the jet stream well positioned to our south, lots of blocking towards Svalbard, Iceland, even into Greenland and Scandinavia. That would indicate a strong possibility of northerly or easterly winds. Again, this would be pretty cold for February. And finally March, a big North Atlantic ridge towards southern Greenland and Iceland. Maybe not as sustained in terms of cold weather as we're seeing blues re-emerge across the northern parts. Up towards the Arctic, that probably would indicate, again, a wavy jet stream, some cold incursions. So JMA, not a crazy winter, but definitely more on the side of colder weather appearing in the winter. This is the CMCC run, and you can see again, for November, we actually got a bit more blocking to the north and more low pressure to our south. Again, different models are going to have different outcomes, different biases, they have different ways that they trend. The CMCC here, definitely showing high pressure to our north, low pressure to our south, probably more of a cooler easterly flow. Nothing crazy, but definitely cooler. December, a bit of Atlantic ridging, perhaps towards South Greenland, but still generally a westerly flow. Again, could have some colder incursions. Nothing massive, mild and westerly, but nothing particularly cold either. January, not much of a signal here. Some higher pressure around, some low pressure to our south, towards Iberia. Again, could indicate a very transient month. There could be some blocking, cold weather at times, but also could be some strong westerlies. And that's sometimes what we get when we got almost zero anomaly. It's because it's a transition. The start of the month could be very mild and westerly. The end of the month could be very cold, and how the month comes out overall is no real anomaly. So that could be what we're seeing here. As we get into February, though, you see a lot more blocking developing, especially to our west, out towards the North Atlantic. Again, could indicate northerly or easterly winds. You see lots of low pressure towards Russia, Eastern Europe, Scandinavia. Again, we could see a lobe of polar vortex come out here, and maybe a lobe of polar vortex out towards North America as well. So this could emphasize some cold outbreaks across the mid-latitude. So interesting seeing that. And finally into February, again, big blocking towards Greenland and Iceland. Again, could suggest northerly or easterly flows with those low pressure anomalies still out towards the central and Atlantic. So we'll have to keep a very close eye on that. But very interesting seeing both the GMA and CMCC definitely suggesting blocking is still there, maybe just not in the same capacity as it was in the last couple updates, but still definitely is there, still giving some colder weather. If we look at the Met Office run, so from the British Met Office here, again very similar to the CMCC actually, high pressure to our north, low pressure to our south. This would develop quite a cold easterly wind, definitely coming straight from Eastern Europe and Scandinavia. Very interesting seeing that. So bit of a signal there on the ECMWF for it, very little signal on the JMA for it, but definitely on the Met Office run here. As we head into December, massive blocking towards Scandinavia, up towards Svalbard. Again, this would indicate a battleground between westerlies and easterlies. Could be quite cold at times, could see some transient snow events, but equally, if it actually starts to pop a southeasterly, we've seen that before, we've seen Scandinavian highs, but the wind direction is coming from a southeasterly, so it actually ends up being pretty mild. So again, that one's a little bit sketchy. We'll have to see. If that does come off, it will be very much dependent on more microclimate details or more local details depending on air masses, position of air masses, exact positioning and wind direction there. Into January, quite a lot of blocking around towards Iceland and Greenland. Still some blues over the Arctic, but again, perhaps not full penetration with the blocking. But again, colder spells looking very possible through January. Into February, more Atlantic ridging, a lobe of polar vortex looks like it's heading towards Scandinavia. Again, no blocking get up towards Iceland or Svalbard or up towards Greenland really here, so it could be more again of amplified jet northwesterlies here, so maybe not as direct cold weather, but nevertheless it could be pretty cold and wintry, that sort of pattern with low pressure nearby. And then March got a very minimal signal, again a bit of a mixed pattern, could be a bit of both, but a bit of everything really there. Now finally for the individual runs, we're having a look at the Meteo France model again, coming from the French Met Office. High pressure to the north here, so that is definitely appearing on the majority of runs here. Perhaps easterly or northeasterly winds for November. Again, November's a bit too early really to see widespread cold, unless it happened right at the end of the month. And even then, it has to be a very strong, far-fetched northerly or easterly to see cold weather. We saw it a couple of years ago in 2021. It did come off. Of course, we did, I think it was Storm Arwen, where we saw some heavy snow and very strong winds in Scotland. Very dangerous northerly wind arrived with that. It can happen, but it is, again, if this chart came off in January or February, we'd be probably hyping up a little bit more than if it was in a November, but still cold nonetheless. December, actually, in contrast to what a lot of the other runs, which had more of a westerly based December, the Meteo France run here has high pressure all the way up towards Greenland and Iceland, even extending towards Svalbard, jet stream down towards the Mediterranean. This would be cold and most likely pretty wintry. So Meteo France going for a cold, wintry December. If we go to January, still lots of blocking in the North Atlantic towards Scandinavia. The looks of this, who really knows where the low pressure will be pushed. Again, this is a very interesting chart showing all this extensive higher pressure. Again, could be transient, could be a pattern where we see high pressure develop, and we see some retrogression where it moves from Scandinavia towards Greenland. And that's kind of giving this very weak but very large signal. And equally, it could just be loads of little areas of higher pressure giving a very blocked and mixed signal, not a genuine westerly or easterly flow, very mixed. But yeah, very interesting seeing this Meteo France run, definitely showing a lot more blocking than many of the other runs are showing, and more blocking than we saw in the other months as well. February is a very cold month here actually. Again, January, February are traditionally the coldest months, got the coldest air to our north, and with this sort of pattern blocking towards Greenland, North Atlantic, low pressure towards Scandinavia, we'd be pulling in a bitterly cold northeasterly or easterly wind. This would be very wintry, very cold, and this is the sort of pattern with this sort of overall anomalies could be the pattern that brings something like a beast from the east or just burying us in colder weather. Again, not saying that's going to happen, but if that were to happen, these are the sort of anomaly charts we'd be seeing, a couple months out. If it was nearer the time, we'd probably see darker reds with the confidence increase, but it'd be this sort of pattern: low polar vortex towards Scandinavia and Eastern Europe, high pressure blocking towards Greenland and Iceland, and an easterly flow. And finally, for February, for March, that pattern continues. Another very cold northerly or easterly wind. So yeah, this Meteo France run is extremely interesting indeed, definitely suggesting a cold winter, but not only just a cold winter relative to what we've had recently, but perhaps a colder than average winter compared to the norms, the mean, the average CET, which we haven't been below for a winter period in quite a long time. Again, I don't know the exact details, but it is many years, maybe even decades, maybe more than a decade, going back to maybe December 2010, the winter of that year, and maybe some of the winters around the early 2010s as well, where we saw perhaps colder than average CETs. This is the sort of anomalies that would produce it. So very interesting seeing that. So of course, we started the video by having a look at the ECMWF run, which definitely did back off from the blocking, but all the other runs have either shown blocking still there, just not quite as cold and wintry, or like the Meteo France here, showing something extremely cold and wintry indeed. Now, the final thing we will have a look at is what the Copernicus does, which I really do like, this multi-system seasonal model, and basically it adds up all of the models available on the website. Not all of the models we've had a look at today, so we didn't have a look at the DWD, the NCP, or the ECCC. We didn't have a look at those runs today, but we looked at the other 5. So this is all of them sort of weighted together, giving an overall pattern from what all the models available on Copernicus does have. This is the October base time. Now, November, there is a little bit of that blocking signal to our north, but nothing crazy. Definitely a bigger low pressure signal to our south. So perhaps the other ones we didn't have a look at had more of a westerly flow, and that's why it's cancelled out a little bit. But still, need to keep a keen interest on November to see what is in store, as it could be cold weather, or at least colder than average. Maybe nothing widespread in terms of snow or ice or very cold weather, but could be pretty chilly indeed. December, definitely a westerly. Look at that low pressure out towards southwest. We'd be expecting a southwesterly wind. So I know the Meteo France run did go pretty cold, and a couple other runs hinted at some blocking, maybe some Scandinavian highs. But when we add them all together, and we look at all of them together, it is looking likely from the models here for more of a southwesterly wind. Again, that's what sort of the last couple of months have shown, that December maybe not might not be that cold. Seeing that reaffirmed here. January, very interesting. No signal at all, really. The whole of the North Atlantic, Northwest Europe, Greenland, Scandinavia, Svalbard is all white. So no sort of preferable pattern. Again, likely a big mishmash of blocking patterns and westerly patterns all mixing up together to give no signal overall. So not really a helpful pattern here, or helpful chart, but it does indicate that the models are at least split. All sort of outcomes are on the table. So yes, there was a bit of blocking on the January month. Again, we never see massive signals on this multi-system seasonal forecast, but last month, the month before, we did see some slight blocking signals on this. We're not seeing that today, so perhaps a slight back off, but it's not gone to a westerly fest, or we would be seeing loads of blues here. Interestingly, February, though, hasn't backed off from the blocking signal at all. This is the sort of pattern we were seeing in January last month, and in the previous updates. Here, we're seeing the blocking signal remain for February here. So this would be very cold. This would be wintry as well, with big blocking towards Greenland and Iceland. So very interesting seeing February still holding that. Perhaps again, January just shifting slightly, becoming more of a transition month. Who knows? We will have to wait and see. But definitely still some good consistency from these runs. but perhaps some slight alterations, especially in that January period. And then finally March, which we haven't had a look at in the last couple of days because it only does extend out to February in the last update. You can see blocking signal actually towards the North Atlantic, Greenland and Iceland, probably an easterly wind with low pressure out towards Eastern Europe and Central Europe. So again, could be another quite cold month. So again, perhaps all these individual runs and the multi-system seasonal run all suggesting perhaps a bit of a backloaded winter with cold weather dominating. Perhaps as we head into January, then maybe definitely February and even into March. So very interesting seeing that today. Again, we're going to have to wait another month to get another proper update on these seasonal runs. But again, we are seeing some consistencies. Blocked weather definitely is a consistent feature post the new year. Definitely more westies are a bit of a feature in December. But we are seeing perhaps a bit more of a feature of maybe some easterlies in November. Perhaps January backing off from being a massively blocked month and more to a transition month. So we will have to just wait and find out. Again, none of this is an absolute forecast. Things can change in some. A lot of the time, these models are wrong and can even be significantly wrong. Complete other spectrum. But they do normally get some stuff correct. Like last year, they predicted there'll be colder weather at the start of winter through November, December, and we did see that for a couple of weeks. Again, December actually ended up above average. So in the whole of the month, it didn't get it as predicted, or it didn't turn out as a colder than average month. But we did see a colder spell of a week or two within it. So we did, it is one of those where we got it partially correct. And again, that's most likely what we will see with these seasonal model updates as well. So we will just have to wait and see. But I hope you have enjoyed, and probably next week we'll have a look at some of the polar vortex data, because this has also come out with this new batch of mean sea level pressure data, where we have a look at the polar vortex data, which could be another major driver and could decide whether we do see some blocked weather as we head into the mid-winter period. So anyway, thanks for watching. Hope you have enjoyed. Subscribe if you're new, and I'll see you again for another video soon.